It's a curious thing. Most people think that faith means believing in something, that to have faith, you must hold firmly to certain ideas, certain dogmas, certain statements about God, the universe, and your place in it. But I want to suggest to you that this is precisely not what faith is. In fact, the person who clings most tightly to belief may have the least faith of all. Faith is not clinging. It is not holding on. It is not gripping desperately to ideas like a man drowning, trying to clutch the water as if it were solid. Faith is letting go. When you swim, you don't grab hold of the water. You trust yourself to it. You float because you relax. You let the water support you. And the moment you stiffen, the moment you panic and try to grasp it, you sink. So too with faith. Faith is a state of openness, of trust in the process of life itself, of being carried by something vast, something immeasurable, something you cannot grasp or even define. But this is a frightening prospect for many. The mind desires security, and belief provides that. Belief wraps reality into tidy packages, gives names to the nameless, explanations to the inexplicable. But true faith, the faith that the great mystics speak of, begins where belief ends. It arises when we surrender the need to define, to control, to explain, and instead rest in the infinite mystery of what is. And so, let us walk together into this mystery, not to accumulate more beliefs, but perhaps to finally let them go. You see, what we are speaking about here is not merely a set of ideas, not a philosophy to be adopted, or a system of doctrines to be believed in. It is rather an experience, or more precisely, experiencing. Faith is something that operates deep in your being, in your bones, as it were, not simply in your mind. It's not an opinion you hold. It's not a conclusion you've reached. It's a way of being, of relating to the world. And curiously, much of Western religion has inverted this. In many traditions, particularly Christianity as it developed, enormous emphasis has been placed on correct belief. Do you accept the right dogmas, the right doctrines? Are you saying the right words about God? Because you are saved, not by works, but by faith. Yet ironically, that faith has often been reduced to mere belief, the mental acceptance of certain statements as true. But belief in this sense is fragile. It must be defended. It is always in danger of being contradicted, disproven, challenged. That is why belief often leads to fanaticism, because it clings so tightly to its ideas, it fears anything that might threaten them. Faith, on the other hand, needs no defense. The one who truly has faith can afford to be open, flexible, even playful, because they trust the underlying process of life itself without needing to seize it in the net of concepts. To have faith is like falling backwards into infinite space, trusting that you will be caught, though you cannot see by whom or by what. Now, if faith is openness, if it is trust in the unfolding of life, then what about knowing God? That too has been gravely misunderstood. In many religious traditions, particularly in Christianity, they tell us that God can never truly be known, that the infinite cannot be grasped by the finite mind, that God, being ultimate, resists every attempt to capture him with thought. And yet, at the very same time, much energy has been spent debating what to believe about God. Endless arguments, councils, creeds, and declarations. Do you believe in the Trinity? Do you believe in the Incarnation? Do you believe in the virgin birth? But these are beliefs about God, not God. Very early on, the Christian Church rejected the movement called Gnosticism, a path that emphasized gnosis, or direct experiential knowledge of the divine. The Gnostics spoke of three types of people: the pneumatic, the spiritual ones; the psychic, the soul-centered ones; and the hilic, the material ones, concerned only with the world of things. Orthodox Christianity rejected this classification. Rightly so, perhaps, for spirit and matter need not be enemies. After all, the central miracle of Christianity is the incarnation, that God became flesh, the infinite took form, the divine entered the world of the material. As St. Athanasius said, God became man, that man might become God. And yet, you rarely hear that in church today. For many, the focus remains not on experiencing the divine directly, but on adhering to correct ideas about the divine. And this, you see, is the great tragedy of confusing belief with faith. In the mystical tradition, especially among Christian Neoplatonists, there is a beautiful paradox. The highest knowledge of God is a kind of unknowing. They called it agnosia, not ignorance, as we might assume, but a special kind of knowledge through unknowing. Dionysius the Areopagite, that mysterious figure of early Christian mysticism, taught that God is best known by stripping away all that we think we know. This is the path of negative theology, the via negativa. God is not one, not even unity captures him. God is not spirit, not mind, not justice, not even love. For all these concepts fall short. The more you try to define God, the further away you move. For any concept, any image, is less than God. If you see something and say, "Ah, this is God," you have only seen a creature of God, an angel perhaps, but not God himself. The cloud of unknowing, as one medieval mystic called it, is where true faith lives. It is not a blankness, it is not a void, it is not the absence of thought in the sense of mere emptiness. No, it is a fullness too vast for any single thought to contain. And here the traditions of East and West meet. For the Hindus call this jnana, the same as gnosis. The sages of India speak of it as neti, neti, not this, stripping away all concepts until only the mystery remains. In unknowing, we fall back into the infinite, not grasping but surrendering, not seeing God as an object, but as the very ground of all seeing. You see, when you explore deeply enough, the boundaries between traditions begin to dissolve. The Christians speak of the cloud of unknowing. The Hindus say neti, neti, not this, not that. The Buddhists speak of sunyata, the great void, but all point toward the same mystery. The highest realization is not to escape the world, not to shut down the senses, not to sit in catatonic blankness. That is a profound misunderstanding. In some traditions, people imagine that enlightenment means sitting unmoving, deaf and blind to the world, like a stone, as if ultimate wisdom were the absence of life itself. But no, the Chinese Zen master Huineng warned against this very error. To confuse emptiness with nothingness is to miss the point entirely. True emptiness, true sunyata, is not a void that excludes, but a space that includes all things without being stained by any of them. Space contains all stars, planets, and galaxies, yet remains perfectly empty. You cannot hammer a nail into space. You cannot spit on the sky and soil it. Your mind, your true nature, is like that space. It contains every thought, every feeling, every moment, but remains unstained. The Hindus call the ultimate state nirvikalpa samadhi, non-conceptual awareness. But this does not mean blankness. It means awareness free from the chains of concepts, an openness so vast that nothing is excluded and nothing clings. This is not the emptiness of death. It is the fullness of life overflowing. And so we come to what may be the most beautiful paradox of all. The highest state of consciousness is not one that withdraws from life, but one that fully embraces it. If nirvana and samsara are truly one, as the Buddhists say, then the awakened one does not flee the world, but lives deeply within it. The Bodhisattva, the ideal figure of Mahayana Buddhism, is not wrapped in a trance, not hovering in some otherworldly bliss. No, he is here, fully present, fully engaged, moving through the world with the grace that comes from knowing there is nothing to fear. The spirit becomes flesh, the word becomes life, the infinite expresses itself through the finite. You see, if the highest reality were some exclusive state, some frozen, silent void, it would contradict itself. For what is truly infinite must leave nothing outside. The non-dual contains all opposites. It is not one, for one excludes many. It is not nothing, for nothing excludes something. It simply is, boundless, measureless, whole, like space. No edge, no outside, no division. You may even glimpse it in the curious shape of a Klein bottle, a three-dimensional Mobius strip, whose inside is outside and whose outside is inside. A surface that transcends our usual categories of inner and outer. This is how reality truly is. Seamless, continuous, undivided. The highest realization is not to escape life, but to see that you were never separate from it at all. Now you might ask, if the awakened one lives fully in the world, why do we speak so often of meditation? Why retreat? Why sit? Why the discipline, the practice? Meditation, you see, is not the goal. It is a medicine, not a diet. When you wish to open a door, you may pick up a brick to knock, but you do not carry the brick into the house. When you wish to cross a river, you build a raft, but you do not haul the raft on your back once you've reached the other shore. And yet, many become attached to the practices themselves. They confuse the raft for the destination. They turn the doorway into a revolving door, endlessly circling, never passing through. They say, "What a marvelous experience this meditation is." They become fascinated by the spinning, by the discipline itself, forgetting entirely that the whole point was to walk through, into life itself. Spiritual practice can become a subtle form of spiritual vanity, a kind of religious one-upmanship. I meditate longer than you. I am more disciplined than you. I have experienced higher states than you. Be very careful of this. The purpose of meditation is to prepare the mind to release its grasping, to see through the illusion of separation, and finally, to drop even the meditation itself. The awakened one walks freely, neither clinging to practices nor rejecting them, for he has seen that all tools are temporary. What matters is not the method, but the surrender. And now we arrive at the delightful heart of the matter. True faith is not grim, not serious in the sense of rigid solemnity. It is not a heavy burden to carry, it is rather a dance, a play, a cosmic joke of sorts. You see, all the doctrines, all the beliefs, all the elaborate structures of theology, they are fingers pointing at the moon. And the tragedy is that people often stare at the finger, worship the finger, argue about the shape of the finger, and never see the moon. The one who truly has faith can laugh, because he knows, deeply, viscerally, that he is not in control. He has let go of grasping. He falls backwards into infinite space, not knowing, not needing to know, but trusting utterly that the process of existence will catch him. In Zen, they say, "Be kind to the crazy ones, for their souls are already with God." And perhaps, in a certain sense, true faith is a kind of holy madness. The willingness to surrender control, to abandon certainty, to rejoice in not knowing. You see, there is a great secret game in spiritual circles. The game of seriousness, the game of importance, the game of being more enlightened than thou. A parasite is someone who keeps going through the revolving door, but only because someone else keeps giving it a push. But the one who walks right through, who leaves the door behind, who steps into the great mystery without the need to carry any tools, any labels, any beliefs, that one is free, that one is truly alive. And so, in the end, what is faith? It is not belief. It is not doctrine. It is not the fevered clinging to ideas that make us feel secure. Faith is surrender. It is the courage to release your grasp on life, to stop clutching, stop resisting, and simply allow. To trust the flow of existence the way you trust the water when you float, knowing it will carry you, though you cannot command it. To live in faith is to fall backwards into the arms of God. Arms you cannot see, cannot define, cannot control, but which you know are always there. It is to awaken in the morning with no guarantee, no certainty, no assurance of what tomorrow will bring, and yet to breathe, to smile, to walk forward, knowing that you are already home. The great mystery is not something to be solved. It is something to be lived. You do not solve music. You play it, you dance with it, and so it is with life. Faith is not about having the answers. It is about being at peace without them. In the words of an old Zen master, when you walk, just walk. When you sit, just sit. Above all, don't wobble. That is faith.
Have you ever noticed that the things we cling to most desperately are precisely the things that slip through our fingers like water, and yet we continue to grasp? As if our suffering were not enough evidence that we're doing something peculiar. You see, we have this extraordinary habit of trying to hold on to things that were never meant to be held. It's rather like trying to clutch water in your fist. The tighter you squeeze, the less you have. Isn't it curious that we cause ourselves such tremendous suffering by denying the most obvious fact of existence? Everything changes, everything, and yet we build our lives around the strange fantasy that we can somehow arrest this process. I've often wondered what would happen if we simply stopped this exhausting battle against the fundamental nature of reality. What if the source of our pain isn't change itself, but our resistance to it? Think about it this way. When you're in a river and fighting against the current, you exhaust yourself. Your muscles ache, your breathing becomes labored, and eventually you may even drown. But the moment you relax and flow with the current, well, something rather remarkable happens. The very same river that was threatening to destroy you now carries you effortlessly. Our suffering follows the same pattern. We fight against impermanence with everything we have. We build monuments, create legacies, desperately trying to leave some permanent mark on an impermanent world, and in doing so we create the very suffering we're trying to avoid. What if, and this is rather startling when you really consider it, what if our grip on permanence is not the solution to our suffering, but its very source? There's a marvelous saying attributed to Heraclitus: no man ever steps in the same river twice. It's not just that the river is changing, though of course it is, with new water constantly flowing through, but the man is changing too. Neither the river nor the man remains the same. And yet, we have this peculiar notion that we are stable entities moving through a stable world. We wake up and think, here I am again, the same person I was yesterday. But are you? Really? The cells in your body are constantly being replaced. The thoughts in your mind arise and dissolve like clouds. Your emotions flow and transform like weather patterns. Even your most cherished beliefs shift subtly over time. What precisely remains the same? You see, impermanence isn't just a philosophical concept, it's the very texture of existence. It's not something happening to reality, it is reality itself. The universe isn't a collection of things, it's a process, a verb, rather than a noun. Consider your breath. You can't hold on to an inhalation forever. The very nature of breathing requires letting go. If you tried to preserve one breath to make it permanent, you would suffocate. Life requires this constant rhythm of taking in and letting go. The same is true of experiences, relationships, achievements, possessions. everything we value. Their very nature requires that they change, transform, and eventually dissolve back into the flow from which they emerged. Understanding impermanence isn't merely an intellectual exercise. It's a profound recognition that transforms how we experience our lives. When we truly see that nothing, absolutely nothing, remains fixed, we begin to hold our experiences differently. Not with the desperate grip of someone about to lose something precious, but with the open hands of someone receiving a gift they never expected in the first place. Isn't it fascinating how we create elaborate systems to deny what we know to be true? We build monuments of stone and say this will last forever, and yet, given enough time, even mountains crumble to dust. We create institutions, religions, and philosophies, all promising some form of permanence, some escape from the inevitable flow of change. But here's the curious thing. Our suffering doesn't come from change itself, it comes from our resistance to it. It's as if we're standing in the ocean, commanding the waves to stop and then feeling devastated when they continue to roll in despite our protests. You see, when we attach ourselves to a particular state of affairs, whether it's youth, health, wealth, a relationship, or even a cherished belief, we create the conditions for our own suffering. Because that state of affairs, whatever it is, will change. It must change. That is its nature. Consider how we approach aging. We spend billions on creams and surgeries, desperately trying to freeze our appearance at some arbitrarily perfect moment. And yet, the very process of fighting against aging creates a kind of suffering that aging itself never could. It's not the wrinkles that cause the pain, it's our rejection of them. Or think about relationships. We meet someone, fall in love, and then immediately try to preserve that initial state of affairs. Don't ever change. We say to our lovers perhaps the cruelest demand one could make of another human being. Because change they will, change they must. And when they do, we experience it as a kind of betrayal, rather than as the natural unfolding of life itself. Even our sense of self, that seemingly solid I at the center of our experience, is something we try desperately to freeze. We create narratives about who we really are, and then suffer tremendously when life reveals these stories to be just that, stories, not reality. What if, instead of trying to freeze the unfrozen, we learn to skate on this thin ice of existence? What if, instead of fighting against change, we learn to move with it, like a skilled surfer riding the waves? You know, people often misunderstand what the Eastern traditions mean by attachment. They think it means not caring or being emotionally distant. Nothing could be further from the truth. The problem isn't caring deeply, it's the peculiar way we care, the way we cling. Imagine holding a beautiful bird in your hands. If you clutch it too tightly, you'll crush it. If you're too loose, it flies away. The art is in finding that perfect balance, holding gently enough that the bird remains unharmed, yet firmly enough that it doesn't escape prematurely. This is precisely the dance between attachment and letting go. We are by nature beings who form attachments. We love, we desire, we hope, we dream, and there's nothing wrong with that. The question isn't whether to care or not to care, it's how to care in a way that acknowledges the temporary nature of all things. Consider how we might love another person. We can love them as if they were a possession, something to be controlled, preserved, kept exactly as they are. Or we can love them as they truly are, a process, a flow, a continuous unfolding of potential. The first kind of love creates suffering for both parties. The second creates liberation. The same is true of everything we value. We can hold our achievements, our possessions, our beliefs, even our own bodies and minds, with that same quality of gentle attention, present and engaged, but not grasping. This dance between attachment and letting go isn't something we master once and for all. It's a continuous practice, a moment-by-moment choice. And curiously, the more we practice letting go, the more deeply we can actually experience each moment. Because we're no longer distracted by the fear of loss, by the desperate attempt to make permanent what is inherently temporary. There's a profound freedom in this recognition. When we stop trying to arrest the flow of life, we can actually begin to live it fully. We can dive into the river of existence without the fear of drowning because we've stopped fighting against its current. Now, you might think it strange, but I've always found death to be rather friendly. Not in a morbid sense, you understand, but in the way it clarifies everything. Death is the ultimate teacher of impermanence, the one professor whose lessons we cannot possibly ignore, though goodness knows we try. Consider how differently you might live today if you were absolutely certain it was your last day on earth. The petty concerns would fall away. The grudges would seem absurd. The beauty of simply being alive would become startlingly apparent. And yet the truth is that any day could be our last. We simply live in a kind of collective denial about this obvious fact. Death isn't some unfortunate design flaw in the universe. It's an essential aspect of life itself. Without death, there could be no renewal, no evolution, no transformation. A world without death would be a world without birthostatic, unchanging tableau. You see, we often think of death as something that happens at the end of life. But that's not quite right. Death is happening all the time. The person you were 10 years ago has died. The thoughts you had moments ago have died. Each breath ends in a little death, making space for the next inhalation. This continuous process of dying and being reborn is not something to fear, it's something to recognize as the very rhythm of existence. And when we do, something rather remarkable happens. We stop taking life for granted. That sunset you're watching, it will never appear exactly that way again. That conversation with a loved one, it's unique in all of time. That feeling in your body right now, it's already changing, transforming, dissolving. Death teaches us that nothing can be held on to forever. And in doing so, it gives us the greatest gift of all, the capacity to be fully present for this momentary miracle we call life. When we accept that everything is temporary, including ourselves, we can finally stop trying to make it otherwise. And in that surrender, we find not despair, but a profound appreciation for the fleeting beauty of existence. It's quite peculiar, isn't it? The universe clearly operates according to principles of constant change and transformation, and yet our minds seem specifically designed to resist this fundamental truth. Why would that be? Why would evolution equip us with brains that are so adamantly opposed to reality itself? The answer, I think, lies in understanding the mind's primary function. You see, the mind is essentially a pattern recognition and prediction machine. Its job is to create a stable model of reality that allows us to navigate our environment successfully. And for that limited purpose, the illusion of permanence is actually quite useful. If you're a prehistoric human trying to find your way back to your camp, it helps to believe that the mountain on the horizon is a fixed, permanent feature of the landscape. If you're trying to maintain social bonds, it helps to believe that your tribe members have stable, consistent identities. The mind creates these useful fictions because, on a practical level, they work at least in the short term. But here's where it gets interesting. The very same mechanism that helps us navigate the physical world becomes problematic when applied to our inner experience. When we use this pattern-making, permanence-seeking function of mind to try to stabilize our sense of self, our emotional states, our relationships, well, that's where suffering begins. Because unlike that mountain on the horizon, which changes so slowly that we can safely treat it as permanent for practical purposes, our inner landscape is constantly shifting. Emotions arise and dissolve like weather patterns. Thoughts appear and disappear like clouds. Even our most basic sense of who we are transforms continuously throughout our lives. The mind resists this fluidity. It wants to create a solid, stable self that it can rely on. It wants emotional states that don't fluctuate. It wants relationships that never change. And when reality fails to conform to these demands, as it invariably does, the mind experiences this as a kind of betrayal, a fundamental wrongness that must be corrected. But what if the problem isn't with reality? What if the problem is with the mind's insistence that reality should conform to its model? What if our suffering stems not from the changing nature of existence, but from our persistent denial of it? There's a delightful irony in the human predicament. We resist impermanence because we think it will bring us suffering, when in fact it's our resistance itself that creates our pain. And the corollary to this is equally surprising. When we finally surrender to the flow of change, we discover a kind of freedom we never imagined possible. I'm reminded of the Taoist concept of Wu Wei, often translated as non-doing or effortless action. It's not about passivity or resignation. Rather, it's about aligning yourself so perfectly with the natural flow of things that your actions emerge spontaneously from the situation itself, without the interference of the ego's agenda. Think of how a skilled surfer moves with a wave. There's tremendous activity there, balance, adjustment, response, but it all emerges from a deep attunement to the wave's own energy. The surfer isn't fighting against the wave or trying to control it. They're dancing with it, participating in its movement. When we embrace the temporary nature of all things, something similar happens in our lives. We stop exhausting ourselves by swimming upstream against the current of change. We stop bracing ourselves against the inevitable transformations of existence, and in doing so we discover an unexpected lightness of being. Consider how we might approach a beautiful sunset if we truly understood its ephemeral nature. We wouldn't waste our time trying to preserve it or make it last longer. We wouldn't take 20 photographs instead of actually looking at it. We would simply be there, fully present, allowing the experience to unfold without interference. And paradoxically, this complete acceptance of its temporary nature would allow us to experience it more deeply, not less. The same is true of all our experiences. When we stop trying to hold on to pleasant states and push away unpleasant ones, when we simply allow each experience to arise and dissolve in its own time, we discover a profound liberation. We're no longer at the mercy of our endless craving for permanence in an impermanent world. And here's the truly fascinating part. When we surrender our demand that things remain the same, we actually become more effective in our actions. Like that surfer who works with the wave rather than against it, we find that we can accomplish more with less effort. Our energy is no longer wasted on the impossible task of stopping change. It's channeled into the art of dancing with it. Now, I can almost hear some of you thinking, if everything is changing and nothing can be held on to, why bother doing anything at all? Why not just give up and drift aimlessly through life? It's a fair question, and one that points to a common misunderstanding about the nature of acceptance. You see, there's a world of difference between passive resignation and active surrender. Resignation says nothing matters because everything changes. Surrender says everything matters precisely because it changes. One leads to nihilism and despair, the other to engagement and joy. The middle way I'm suggesting lies between two extremes: the extreme of resistance, where we exhaust ourselves fighting against the nature of reality, and the extreme of indifference, where we disengage from life altogether. This middle path is one of conscious participation in the flow of existence. Consider how you might approach a relationship from this middle way. You don't cling desperately to your partner, trying to prevent them from changing or growing. Nor do you remain emotionally distant, protecting yourself from the inevitable pain of loss. Instead, you engage fully with them as they are in this moment, appreciating their presence without demanding that it last forever. Or think about a career or creative pursuit. The middle way isn't about striving desperately for some permanent achievement that will define you for all time. Nor is it about giving up on meaningful work, because what's the point? It's about engaging wholeheartedly in what you're doing right now, allowing your actions to emerge from a place of authentic response to the present moment. This middle way requires a certain kind of attentiveness, a willingness to be perpetually awake to what each situation calls for, without the filter of preconceived notions or rigid demands. It requires us to hold our plans and expectations lightly, ready to adapt when circumstances change, as they inevitably will. And perhaps most importantly, it requires us to recognize that meaning doesn't come from permanence. Meaning arises from full engagement with the temporary nature of existence. The fact that a piece of music ends doesn't make it meaningless. In many ways, it's the very finitude of the experience that gives it its poignancy and beauty. It's a fascinating question to consider, isn't it? How would your life transform if you genuinely embraced the temporary nature of all things? Not just intellectually, but deep in your bones, in that intimate place where your most fundamental relationship with existence takes shape. I suspect that most of us secretly live as if we had all the time in the world. We postpone joy. We delay telling someone we love them. We put off pursuing our deepest aspirations because we imagine there will always be another day, another opportunity. But what if we truly recognize the ephemeral nature of everything, including ourselves? You see, when we deeply accept impermanence, something rather extraordinary happens to our priorities. The trivial concerns that consume so much of our energy, what others think of us, whether we're successful enough, whether we have the right possessions, begin to fall away. For, as I once observed, the meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. And yet, everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. When we truly accept the temporary nature of all things, we naturally become more present. There's less rumination about the past, less anxiety about the future. We understand that this moment, this precise configuration of existence that includes your breath, these words, your thoughts will never exist again. And there's a poignant beauty in that recognition. I've often said that there is simply no problem of life. Life is absolutely purposeless play. It doesn't have to continue. There is no reason whatever to explain it. The real question is how people come to think there is a problem, whatever made them imagine that life is serious. When we accept impermanence, we can enter into this play more fully without the desperate need to secure some permanent achievement or identity. Relationships change too. When we recognize that everyone we love is essentially on loan to us for an unspecified period, we tend to take them less for granted. We become more attentive, more appreciative of the simple miracle of their presence. We stop trying to mold them into what we think they should be, and instead celebrate what they actually are in this moment. Even our relationship with suffering transforms. As I've noted, there will always be suffering, but we must not suffer over the suffering. When we accept the temporary nature of all experience, including painful experiences, we stop adding the additional layer of resistance that turns pain into suffering. We can meet each experience directly, without the added burden of wishing it were otherwise. Perhaps most profoundly, accepting impermanence changes our relationship with death, both the small deaths that occur throughout life as we let go of identities, relationships, beliefs, and ultimately, the death of the body itself. Rather than seeing death as a failure or a terrible mistake in the cosmic order, we can recognize it as an essential aspect of the dance of existence. Now we come to perhaps the most delightful paradox of all. When we fully embrace the temporary nature of existence, we discover something that feels remarkably like eternity. Not eternity in the sense of endless duration, more time stretching on and on, but eternity in the sense of timelessness, the quality of being completely outside of time altogether. You see, our usual way of experiencing time is rather like watching a movie. We sit in our seats as the frames flicker by one after another, creating the illusion of continuity. The past is what we've already seen. The future is what we anticipate seeing. And the present is the frame currently before our eyes. But this way of experiencing time is itself a construct, a useful fiction. When we fully enter into the present moment, when we cease to be distracted by memories of the past or anticipations of the future, something quite extraordinary happens. Time, as we normally experience it, seems to fall away. We enter what some might call the eternal now, a state in which there is no passing time, only this ever-present awareness. I've observed that, for there is never anything but the present, and if one cannot live there, one cannot live anywhere. This isn't just poetic language. It's pointing to a fundamental truth about the nature of our experience. The past exists only as memory in the present moment. The future exists only as anticipation in the present moment. All we ever actually experience is now. And here's where the paradox becomes most apparent. In fully accepting the temporary nature of all things, we discover that which is not temporary. Not as some separate transcendent reality beyond this world, but as the very ground of our experience, the consciousness or awareness in which all temporary phenomena arise and dissolve. It's rather like recognizing that while the waves on the ocean are constantly changing, rising and falling, appearing and disappearing, the ocean itself remains. You are both the changing waves of experience and the unchanging awareness in which all experience occurs, both temporary and eternal. This recognition doesn't make the changing nature of experience any less real or meaningful. On the contrary, it allows us to appreciate the extraordinary preciousness of each fleeting moment. Like a sunset that we know will soon fade, the very impermanence of our experiences gives them their poignancy and beauty. And perhaps this is the ultimate liberation from suffering, not the achievement of some permanent state of happiness or the avoidance of pain, but the discovery of that within us which remains untouched by the coming and going of all things. That silent witness, that spacious awareness which is neither born nor dies, neither increases nor decreases, neither improves nor deteriorates. In embracing the temporary nature of all things, we paradoxically discover that which is beyond time and somewhere else, but right here, right now, in the depths of our own being. So here we are, at the end of our contemplation together, and yet of course there is no end. There never was a beginning either. We've simply shared a moment in this vast flowing river of existence, a river that has no source and no destination, only this continuous unfolding. What does it mean to recognize that everything is temporary? It certainly doesn't mean we should despair. Quite the opposite. It means we can finally stop exhausting ourselves by swimming against the current of life. We can cease the futile attempt to make permanent what was never meant to be permanent. We can surrender to the beautiful, terrible, magnificent dance of existence. You see, when we truly understand impermanence, suffering loses its sting. Not because we've found some clever way to avoid pain that's impossible and unnecessary, but because we've stopped adding resistance to our experience. We've stopped demanding that reality be different from what it is. And in that surrender we discover a freedom and peace that no amount of security or permanence could ever provide. Perhaps the greatest joke in the cosmos is that what we've been searching for all along, that sense of belonging, of coming home, of being complete, was never something to be achieved in the future. It was always here, in this moment, hidden in plain sight, within the very impermanence we've been trying to escape. So I invite you to consider, what if the temporary nature of all things isn't a flaw in the universe to be overcome, but rather its most beautiful feature? What if our suffering comes not from change itself, but from our resistance to it? And what if, in fully embracing the transient nature of existence, we discover that which has been here all along, the silent, spacious awareness in which all temporary forms arise and dissolve? If these words have resonated with something deep within you, perhaps it's not because I've shared something new. Perhaps it's because I've reminded you of something you've always known, beneath the noise and distraction of everyday concerns. A recognition that has been waiting patiently for you to remember it. Should these reflections spark something within you that feels worth sharing, by all means pass them along to others who might benefit. But remember, no one can awaken for you. No one can release your grip on permanence but you. No one can show you the beauty of impermanence until you're ready to see it for yourself. And that, my friends, is exactly as it should be. The universe has been playing an extraordinary game with itself for billions of years. This game is called death and rebirth. It's happening in every moment, with every breath, with every thought that arises and dissolves. And yet, we've convinced ourselves that we're somehow exempt from this cosmic dance. We believe we should be permanent in a world where nothing else is. What a curious predicament we've created. In the next little while, I'd like to explore with you this most fundamental aspect of existence, seen not as something morbid or frightening, but as the very secret to living fully. For when we truly understand death, we finally understand life. In our Western world, we've created the most extraordinary situation. We've made death into something unspeakable. We don't talk about it at dinner parties. We shield our children from it. We've even created an entire industry dedicated to making corpses look as if they're merely sleeping. Isn't that fascinating? You see, this avoidance isn't accidental. It stems from a fundamental misunderstanding about what we are. We've convinced ourselves that we are permanent entities, separate from the world, desperately trying to maintain our existence against all odds. And from this misunderstanding springs our terror. But what if I told you that this very attempt to avoid thinking about death is precisely what makes it so frightening? It's rather like trying not to think about a pink elephant. The harder you try, the more it dominates your thoughts. Our culture's desperate attempt to ignore death has paradoxically made it into a monster lurking in our subconscious. Consider for a moment the extraordinary paradox we've created. The one experience that every single human being will have without exception has become the experience we refuse to contemplate. We prepare for everything else, education, career, family, retirement, but not for the one certainty in life. How very odd. What if I told you that the fear of death arises primarily from a case of mistaken identity? You see, we have been taught to believe that we are isolated entities, separate from the universe. But this separation is an illusion. As I often say, you and I are as much continuous with the universe as a wave is continuous with the ocean. Have you ever seen a wave that was separate from the ocean? Of course not. The wave is a pattern of behavior that the ocean is doing. Similarly, you are something the whole universe is doing, in the same way that a wave is something that the whole ocean is doing. The fear of death comes from identifying yourself with the wave rather than with the water. If you think, I am this particular pattern that must be preserved at all costs, then naturally you will fear the moment when that pattern dissolves. But if you realize that you are the water, taking on countless forms, rising and falling in an eternal dance, where is the fear? Consider this curious fact. You cannot experience your own absence. Try it. Can you imagine what it's like to not exist? You can't, because there would be no you to have the experience. What we fear is not non-existence, but the idea of Iten, idea that makes no sense, since non-existence cannot be experienced. The cosmic joke is that we've convinced ourselves we're separate from nature, when in fact we are nature. We are the universe experiencing itself. And from this perspective, death is not an end, but a transformation like a wave returning to the ocean. Look at the world around you. Do you see anything permanent? The seasons change, mountains slowly erode, stars are born and die. Everything is in flux. And yet, we somehow expect ourselves to be the exception to this universal pattern. Death is not an aberration in nature, it's essential to the rhythm of life. Without death, there could be no birth. Without autumn and winter, there could be no spring. The fallen leaves decay to nourish new growth. Your own body is completely renewed every 7 years or so. The person you were physically a decade ago has entirely vanished. As I've often pointed out, without birth and death, and without the perpetual transmutation of all forms of life, the world would be static, rhythmless, undancing, mummified. Would you really want to live in such a world? The universe doesn't create and then destroy. Creation and destruction are two aspects of the same process, like the front and back of your hand. You cannot have one without the other. Life and death are not enemies, but partners in an eternal dance. So you see, death is not a mistake to be corrected, or an enemy to be defeated. It is as natural and necessary as the night following day. The real question isn't how to avoid death, but how to relate to it in a way that enriches life rather than diminishes it. We are so caught up in the illusion of time, aren't we? Past, present, future, these neat little compartments we've created to make sense of our experience. But have you ever noticed that you never actually experience the past or the future? You only ever experience now. The past exists only as memory, the future only as anticipation, and both of these happen in the present moment. This moment right now, as you're listening to my voice, is all there ever really is. And yet we spend most of our lives mentally absent from it, lost in regrets about yesterday or anxieties about tomorrow. Death appears frightening when we think of it as something that will happen later in a future we imagine. But the future never arrives. When death comes, it will be now the same, now in which you've always lived. There is nowhere else for it to happen. Consider this fascinating perspective. Just as space is what separates objects from one another, time is what separates events. But these separations are conventions, useful fictions. In reality, all space and all time are aspects of a unified whole. Death is not an event that waits for you at the end of a long road. It's an aspect of the eternal present, just as birth is. So you see, when we step outside the linear view of time, death is not an ending but a transition within the eternal now. It's like turning a corner on a path. The path continues, just in a direction you couldn't see before. Do you know why children love to play hide and seek? There's something delicious about pretending not to know where someone is and then experiencing the joy of rediscovery. In a way, this game mirrors something profound about existence itself. The universe, you see, is playing an elaborate game of hide and seek with itself. In Sanskrit, they call it Leela, divine play. We are the universe hiding from itself, forgetting its true nature so that it can have the delight of remembering again. Through the development of the egotist sense of being a separate self, we've hidden our fundamental connection to everything. We've drawn boundaries around ourselves and said, this is me and that is not me. And then we've forgotten that we made up these boundaries in the first place. Death is the ultimate revealing in this cosmic game of hide and seek. It's the moment when the pretense falls away, the boundaries dissolve, and what you've always been, the entire cosmos, is revealed once more. Not as an intellectual concept, but as lived reality. There's a profound liberation in no longer having to pretend that you're just this limited, separate entity struggling against the universe. In death, the game is upend. What could be more freeing than that? The fear comes only from forgetting that it's a game we chose to play. Eastern traditions have long understood what we in the West struggle to accept. Impermanence is not a flaw in the system, but its very essence. The Japanese have a concept called mono no aware, the pathos of things which recognizes that the transience of life is precisely what gives it beauty. Think of cherry blossoms. Would they be as cherished if they bloomed all year round? No, it's their brief, exquisite appearance and quick falling that makes them so precious. Their impermanence doesn't diminish their beauty, it constitutes it. Similarly, the Buddhist tradition teaches us not to grasp or cling to passing phenomena. As the Diamond Sutra puts it, we should view all things as a phantom, a dewdrop, a bubble in a stream. Not to devalue them, but to appreciate their true nature. When we resist impermanence, when we try to freeze time or deny death, we create suffering for ourselves. It's like trying to hold on to a handful of water by squeezing it tightly. The tighter we grip, the more quickly it slips away. But when we learn to open our hands, to appreciate without clinging, something remarkable happens. We discover a deeper beauty in life's passing nature. We find ourselves fully present in each moment, neither rushing toward the future nor clinging to the past. And in that presence we taste eternity. Isn't it interesting that the one reality that makes life most precious is the very one we refuse to face? Death is life's greatest deadline, and without deadlines, we procrastinate. Without death, life would lose its poignancy, its urgency, its sweetness. I've often suggested to my students a simple thought experiment. Imagine you had eternal life. What would you do today? Tomorrow? Next year? Would you feel any need to read that book you've been putting off, to reconcile with that friend, to tell someone you love them? Probably not. After all, you could always do it latter, infinitely later. Now, imagine you knew with certainty that you had exactly 1 year to live. How would your priorities shift? What would suddenly become important? What would you let go of? This awareness of finitude focuses the mind wonderfully, doesn't it? Death, you see, is not the opposite of life, it is the backdrop against which life becomes visible. Like stars that can only be seen against the darkness of night, the beauty and meaning of our existence shine forth precisely because they are temporary. So the paradox is this. By accepting death as an integral part of life, we don't diminish life, we enhance it. We bring a new quality of awareness to each moment. We stop postponing joy. We cease living as if we had all the time in the world, and instead live as if each day might be our last, because one day we will be right. Many people fear death because they imagine it as a state of nothingness, a void in eternal darkness. But let's examine this fear more closely. What exactly is nothing, and is it really possible to experience it? You see, we have this curious idea that after death we will somehow be trapped in a dark void, aware of our own non-existence. But that's a contradiction, isn't it? To experience nothingness would require someone to have the experience. And if someone is having an experience, it isn't nothingness at all. As I often point out, when you die, you're not going to have to put up with everlasting non-existence, because that's not an experience. You cannot be aware of being unconscious for the same reason you cannot bite your own teeth. What's more, we all come from what others might call nothing. Before you were born, where were you? What was it like to not exist? You can't remember, because there was no you to have the experience. And yet, here you are, emerged from that very nothingness. Perhaps what we call nothing is actually the source of everything, not an empty void, but an infinite potentiality. Not the absence of existence, but existence in its unmanifested form. After all, the universe itself emerged from what physicists might call a quantum vacuum, not empty space, but a plenum of possibility. There's a beautiful concept in many spiritual traditions that death is not an end but a return, a homecoming. And science, in its own way, confirms this profound intuition. Consider the physical matter that makes up your body. Every atom in you was forged in the heart of a star that exploded billions of years ago. As the poet says, we are quite literally stardust. And when we die, those atoms don't disappear, they simply change form, returning to the great cycle of nature. The carbon in your bones may become part of a tree, which bears fruit eaten by a bird which sings songs that delight a child. The water in your cells will evaporate, join the clouds, fall as rain, flow to the ocean. Nothing is lost. Everything is transformed. And what of consciousness, that mysterious quality that seems to animate matter? Perhaps it too is not created or destroyed, but merely changes form. Like a wave that returns to the ocean, perhaps our individual awareness returns to a universal consciousness from which it temporarily emerged. So you see, death need not be viewed as annihilation, but as reintegration. Not as an exit from existence, but as a return to our source, like a river flowing back to the sea. We came from the universe, we return to the universe, and in truth we never left it at all. We've been home all along. If death is inevitable, and it most certainly is, then perhaps the question isn't how to avoid it, but how to approach it with grace, curiosity, and even a touch of artistic flair. Just as there is an art to living well, there is an art to dying well. The first principle of this art is presence. Death, like birth, is one of life's great transitions, worthy of our full attention. Yet our culture encourages us to be absent from it, or numb ourselves with distractions or medications, to pretend it isn't happening. What if, instead, we chose to be fully present with the mystery of our own passing? The second principle is acceptance. Not a grim resignation, but the kind of acceptance that comes from deep understanding. When we truly see that death is not an enemy but a natural completion of life's cycle, resistance melts away. In its place comes a profound peace. The third principle is curiosity. What lies beyond this life? no one can say with certainty. But rather than filling that unknown with fearful projections, we can approach it with the wide-eyed wonder of a child. Death may well be the greatest adventure of our journey into the ultimate unknown. Throughout history, those who have approached death with awareness have often reported not terror but awe. Not contraction, but expansion. Not an end, but a threshold. Perhaps they glimpsed what the mystics have always intuited, that what we call death is but a doorway to a greater life. As we come to the end of our exploration together, I invite you to consider this. Everything passes. The good and the bad, pleasure and pain, success and failure, all of it is transient, flowing like a river that never steps in the same place twice. This passing nature of all things is not a tragedy to be lamented, but a truth to be embraced. For in accepting the impermanence of life, we discover a profound freedom. We no longer need to grasp so tightly, to control so desperately, to fear so deeply. We can hold life lightly, appreciatively, joyfully, knowing that its very transience is what makes it precious. Death is not waiting for us at the end of a long road. It is here with us from the beginning, the inseparable twin of life, dancing in perfect harmony. And when we befriend death, when we integrate it into our awareness instead of pushing it away, something remarkable happens. We become more alive. So I leave you with this thought. Don't postpone your living until some future moment when all conditions seem perfect. Don't wait to be fully alive. This moment, with all its beauty and imperfection, its joy and sorrow, its absolute transience, this moment is your life. And it is enough. For what we are seeking is not immortality, but eternity. Not endless time, but the transcendence of time. And that eternity, that timeless now, is available to us in every moment if only we have eyes to see and hearts to receive it.